The storm had not stopped for days, wind howling through the broken towers of the old colony, cold dust swirling over shattered metal and glass. Ethan Cole walked carefully across the ruins, his breathing echoing in his helmet, every sound swallowed by the endless silence of a world that had died long ago. He had come here looking for supplies, old tech, maybe something that could be sold for a few credits, but all he found was the whisper of ghosts and the crackle of broken power lines. His ship rested behind a collapsed dome, engines humming softly. It was supposed to be a quick search, 2 hours at most. But as he moved deeper into the ruins, his scanner picked up something strange. A sound, faint but alive, a pulse that didn't belong to any machine. He froze and listened again. The signal repeated. A small, broken cry, almost like a wounded creature calling for help. At first, Ethan thought it was a trick, maybe the wind, maybe the ghosts of the colony playing with his mind. But then it came again, a weak whimper, something small and scared. It pulled at something deep inside him, something he hadn't felt since the war. The need to protect, to help, to save. He tightened his gloves, checked his sidearm, and followed the sound through the rubble. The deeper he went, the darker it grew. His flashlight beam danced across twisted beams and burnt walls. The smell of ash still hung in the air even after all these years. He crouched under a broken archway, the sound louder now. It was coming from beneath a pile of metal and shattered stone. He moved carefully, pushing aside pieces of debris until his light caught something that made him stop breathing. There, curled up inside a hollow space, was a small creature. Its scales were dull silver covered in dust and blood. Tiny wings hung limply at its sides, and its eyes, bright, glowing gold, flickered weakly in the beam of his light. It was no ordinary creature. It was a dragon. Ethan's hand shook. Dragons were not supposed to be here. The draconess species ruled half the outer rim, feared by all. They had ended wars with a single breath. They hated humans. Humans feared them back. And yet, here lay a hatchling, alone, dying, crying softly like a lost child. He looked around quickly, searching for others. Maybe its mother was nearby. Maybe this was a trap. But the area was silent. Only the sound of the wind moving through metal bones of the colony. Ethan stepped closer, the ground crunching under his boots. The dragonlet flinched, letting out a soft hiss that turned into a weak cough. "Easy," he whispered, lowering his weapon. "I'm not going to hurt you." The hatchling's golden eyes focused on him. Its breathing was shallow, and a deep wound ran along its chest where something sharp had pierced the scales. Ethan dropped to his knees and took off his pack, pulling out a med patch. He knew it was madness, helping an alien, especially one of the Draconies. But he couldn't walk away. He pressed the patch gently against the wound. The hatchling whimpered but didn't fight. A moment later it shivered and let out a small spark of blue flame, so faint it barely warmed the air. Ethan smiled sadly. "You've got some fire left in you, little one." He took off his jacket, wrapping the hatchling carefully in it. It weighed almost nothing. Fragile, warm, trembling. He could feel its tiny heart beating fast against his chest as he lifted it up. "You'll be okay," he murmured. "I've got you now." He made his way back to his ship, every step careful, every sound making him turn and look behind. The ruins seemed different now, like eyes were watching from the shadows. Maybe they were. Maybe the Draconies were already looking for this little one. When he reached his ship, the hatch opened with a hiss. He placed the hatchling on a soft blanket near the heater. Its eyes blinked slowly, watching him, studying him. There was intelligence there, far too much for a newborn. It tried to speak, or maybe it was just a breath. But the sound came out broken. Like a whisper between worlds, Ethan sat beside it, removing his helmet. His face was tired, scarred from years of war and wandering. He had seen too many battles, lost too many people. He hadn't saved anyone in a long time. Now here he was, saving something no one else would. Hours passed, The storm outside grew stronger, lightning flashing across the black sky. Inside the ship, the heater hummed softly. The little dragon slept, breathing slowly, its tail twitching in dreams. Ethan watched it, feeling something stir in his chest, something he had forgotten existed. Hope. Before he turned off the lights, he whispered softly, "You're safe now, Lyra." The name came from nowhere, a memory of a star he had seen once, shining alone in the dark. He didn't know why he said it, but it felt right. Outside, the storm screamed. The world was cold and dead. But inside that small ship, a new bond had been born, one between a broken man and a dying dragon. Neither knew it yet, but their meeting would shake the stars. The scanners flickered one last time before Ethan fell asleep. Somewhere far beyond the storm in the endless dark, a fleet stirred, ancient, powerful, and searching. And among their signals, one word repeated over and over again, the name of the hatchling that had just been saved. Lyra. The storm outside had ended. But inside the small ship, silence ruled. Ethan woke to the soft sound of breathing, not human, but steady and calm. He turned his head and saw the hatchling still wrapped in his jacket, lying close to the heater. Its scales shimmered faintly now, silver blue instead of gray. It was alive, stronger, and it made a low, musical hum as it slept. Ethan sat up slowly, his body aching from the cold night. He rubbed his eyes and smiled faintly. He hadn't smiled in months. The little creature had survived the night, and somehow that felt like a victory. He poured a bit of water into a tin cup and placed it near the heater, steam rising in the dim light. When he turned back, the dragonlet was awake. Its golden eyes were open, calm but alert. It tilted its head, studying him the same way he was studying it. For a long time, neither moved. Then slowly it made a soft clicking sound. Ethan laughed quietly. "You hungry?" He took out a small protein bar, broke off a piece, and held it out. The hatchling sniffed the air, then leaned forward, taking it gently with tiny, sharp teeth. It chewed, coughed once, and then licked its lips like it had just tasted something strange but good. Ethan smiled wider. Guess human food isn't so bad. As days passed, the two settled into a rhythm. Ethan repaired parts of his ship while the hatchling followed him around, its small claws tapping softly on the metal floor. He started calling her Lyra, after the star he'd mentioned that first night. It felt right, and every time he said the name, the dragon's eyes glowed brighter. Lyra began to mimic his sounds. At first it was just low growls or hissing echoes, but then came the soft imitation of words. She couldn't say them clearly, but Ethan could tell she was trying. "Lyra," he said slowly, tapping his chest. "That's you." The hatchling blinked, then tapped her chest with one small claw. "Lee-ra," she echoed, her voice broken but beautiful. Ethan froze. The sound of her trying to speak was strange and powerful, something deep that stirred his heart. He laughed again, shaking his head. "You're full of surprises, little one." The days stretched into weeks. Outside, the world was still cold and dead, but inside that small ship, warmth grew. Lyra learned quickly. She explored everything: the glowing panels, the wires, the food compartments. Ethan sometimes caught her staring out the viewport, watching the stars as if she remembered them. He began keeping a log, something he hadn't done since his military days. He recorded her growth, her habits, the strange markings on her wings that seemed to shift when she was upset or happy. He noted that her fire, the small bursts of blue flame, appeared stronger when she was near him, almost as if his presence fueled her. One night, while Ethan slept, Lyra curled up beside him, her tail wrapped around his arm. She was warm like sunlight, breathing softly. When he woke, he didn't move. He just lay there, feeling that warmth and thinking how strange it was that a human and a dragon could find peace together. But peace never lasted long in Ethan's world. A week later, the ship's long-range scanner picked up signals, unidentified ships passing near the planet. Ethan frowned, His screen flickered with red warnings. The signal carried an emblem he recognized. A stylized flame surrounded by ancient symbols, the Draconus Empire. He turned off all power except life support, hoping they wouldn't notice the faint trace of his small ship. Lyra sensed the tension. She pressed close to him, eyes wide. "Shh," he whispered. "It's okay. Stay quiet." The signals moved across the sky, their scanners sweeping the ruins below. Ethan could feel the vibrations through the hull. He held his breath, one hand on Lyra's back. Her heart was racing, fast and loud. Then just as suddenly the signal faded. The ships moved away, the silence returned. He sighed in relief and leaned back in his chair. But when he looked down, Lyra was trembling. She lifted her head and spoke softly. Her voice cracked. "Hun." "Man." Ethan froze. She had spoken clearly this time. Her eyes were full of tears, or something that looked like them. He didn't know dragons could cry. She whispered again. "They hurt. My home." Ethan understood, maybe not the details, but the feeling behind her words. Her home was gone, destroyed, she was the last. He reached out and stroked her scales gently. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "I promise." From that moment, something changed between them. She stopped hiding under blankets and started walking proudly beside him. She helped him repair the ship. Holding tools in her claws, watching and learning, Ethan sometimes talked to her as if she were human. About the stars, about the places he'd been. About the war, Lyra listened, sometimes humming softly, sometimes repeating small words. And when Ethan grew tired or sad, she would rest her head against his arm and whisper, "Safe." Now, the same words he had told her. By the end of the month, she had grown larger. Her wings stretched wider, her eyes brighter. She began to test her flight in the open air. Short bursts, small leaps. Ethan watched from below, laughing, clapping his hands like a proud father. He didn't know it yet, but the bond they shared was no longer just friendship. It was ancient magic, something deeper than human science could name. When she looked at him, something burned faintly on her scales. A mark, glowing faintly in gold, his name and far away across the stars. The Draconis fleet received a strange signal, a pulse carrying that same human name. Ethan Cole, the Empress herself, stirred from her throne, eyes narrowing. "So," she whispered, "he still lives." But inside his small ship, Ethan only smiled, unaware that his kindness had already begun to echo through galaxies, their destinies forever linked by the night he chose to save a dying dragon. Days passed quietly after the fleet signal faded, but deep inside, Ethan knew peace was slipping away. The universe never stayed silent for long, and the Draconis Empire never forgave those who broke its rules. Ethan spent his days fixing ship systems, scanning nearby asteroids for resources, and teaching Lyra words and sounds. She was growing fast, too fast. Her wings stretched wider each week. Her scales brightened like molten silver under light, and her voice grew clearer. Her once childish curiosity was turning into something sharper, awareness. Understanding. One evening, while Ethan calibrated the engine core, Lyra sat near the viewport staring at the stars. Her eyes glowed faint gold. "Home," she whispered softly. Ethan looked up. "You remember it?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Fire, sky, song," she said, her words careful but clear. Then pain. Her claws scraped the metal floor. They came. Ethan set down his tools. "Who came?" She looked at him, eyes heavy with memory. "Hunters." The word echoed in the small cabin. Ethan felt a chill. "Draconis?" he asked, but she didn't answer. She just looked out at the stars again, her tail twitching nervously. Later that night, Ethan reviewed the Galactic reports on his data console. Rumors filled the outer net. The Draconis fleet was searching for something, a stolen royal hatchling, bounties placed across human sectors, entire mining colonies raided for clues. He rubbed his temple. "They're looking for you." "Lyra," he murmured. She turned her head slowly, her golden eyes glowing faintly. "For me?" Ethan nodded. "If they find out you're here, they'll kill us both." Lyra blinked, silent. The air between them grew heavy. Ethan could see the fear in her face, but also something stronger. Guilt. The next morning, they left orbit, flying low through asteroid fields. Ethan kept the ship's energy output minimal to avoid detection. Lyra sat by the window, quiet. Her reflection shimmered in the glass, young but regal, something in her posture already showing what she was destined to become. Hours later, a proximity alarm screamed. Red lights flashed across the cockpit. Ethan's heart jumped. He looked at the radar. 3 ships, small but fast, closing in from the west. "Damn it," he muttered. "They found us." Lyra pressed her claws against the viewport. "Eyes wide, hunters," she whispered again. Ethan started evasive maneuvers, weaving between the rocks. "Hold on," he shouted. The ship rattled as plasma shots streaked past. Each explosion lit up the dark void, shaking the hull. Lyra crouched low, wings folding tight, her instincts flaring. "Can you do anything?" Ethan shouted over the alarms. She growled low. "Not yet." One of the hunter ships fired a magnetic net. Wrapping around Ethan's craft, alarms screamed louder. He slammed the controls, trying to break free. "They're boarding us," he said. Lyra's eyes glowed suddenly, a golden fire igniting deep within. She spread her wings, too large now for the small cabin, and let out a sharp, ancient roar that shook the walls. Sparks flared from her mouth. She leapt toward the window, pressing her claws to the glass. Outside, the nearest hunter ship froze, sensors flickering. Then a burst of blue plasma erupted from Lyra's mouth. Tearing through the void like lightning, it struck the enemy ship directly, the explosion scattering debris through the asteroid field. Ethan stared, half in awe, half in fear. You destroyed it." Lyra's chest heaved, small tendrils of smoke curling from her jaws. "No more hiding," she said quietly, her voice trembling. The other 2 ships turned to retreat. Their scanners had caught the impossible. A living Draconis hatchling alive with human readings nearby. They would report this, Ethan knew. He took a deep breath, setting the ship's autopilot toward the dark edge of the sector. "We're going to have to leave this system," he said. Lyra tilted her head. "Go where?" "Somewhere they won't follow," he said. "Somewhere dead, forgotten." They flew for hours, past shattered moons and ancient wrecks, until they reached a silent region. An abandoned mining station on the edge of a dying star. The light outside flickered red and gold, shadows twisting through empty corridors. Ethan landed the ship carefully and turned off all external lights. "We'll hide here until it's safe," he said. Lyra looked around, uneasy. "It feels sad," she whispered. He nodded. "Yeah, it's a graveyard." For a while they sat in silence, listening to the low hum of the ship. Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You shouldn't have done that," he said finally. She turned to him. "I saved you." "Yes." "And now they know exactly where to look," he said. Frustration in his voice. "You can't use that power, Lyra." "Not unless there's no choice." Her tail curled, and she lowered her head. "I am sorry," Ethan sighed, his anger melting as he saw the guilt in her eyes. "It's not your fault," he said softly. "You did what you had to." He stood and placed a hand on her head. "We'll figure this out together." That night, as Ethan drifted into uneasy sleep, Lyra sat awake beside him, watching the stars flicker through the viewport. She could feel a strange pulse inside her chest, a signal, a call, something ancient and powerful. It echoed faintly through her blood, whispering of her lineage, of the fire that ran in her veins far away. Deep in the heart of the Draconis Empire, a massive ship stirred. On its bridge, an alien general stared at a glowing screen. The signal they had been hunting for 12 long years had returned. He turned to his officers, his voice cold and sharp. "Prepare the fleet. The heir has awakened, back on the mining station." Lyra's eyes opened suddenly, glowing bright gold. Her voice came out in a whisper. "They are coming." Ethan woke with a start, his heart pounding. "What did you say?" She looked at him, fear and determination shining together. "They come for me, and for you." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of destiny pressing on him like gravity. Somewhere in the dark between stars, the hunt had truly begun, and for the first time, he understood. This was no longer about saving a lost creature. It was about surviving the wrath of an empire and protecting the bond that had already changed them both forever. The mining station was dark and silent, floating near the dying red star like a tomb forgotten by time. Ethan's ship rested within one of the hollow hangars. Hidden beneath layers of dust and old metal, He had repaired what he could, patched the hull, recalibrated the engines, and silenced every system that could give away their position. Lyra spent her days pacing restlessly, her wings brushing the walls, her scales flickering between shades of silver and blue. She was growing larger now, nearly the size of Ethan's small shuttle. Her voice was stronger, her mind sharper, but her heart was heavy. She could feel it, the galaxy shifting, her people searching, and her presence calling to them like a beacon she couldn't turn off. Ethan watched her quietly from the ship's bridge. He could see the change in her, not just in size, but in spirit. The curious little hatchling he had rescued was becoming something far greater, something powerful and royal, but also something that could no longer hide. One night, while Ethan sat cleaning a cracked blaster, Lyra approached him silently. Her claws made soft echoes on the floor. She stopped beside him and lowered her head. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but trembling. "They are coming. Closer every day." He set the blaster down and looked at her. "I know. I can feel them," she said. "They call my name in their minds. They send dreams through the stars. They want me to return." He leaned back, staring into her golden eyes. "And what do you want?" Lyra hesitated, her wings folded close. Her gaze dropped to the floor. "I want to stay," she whispered. "With you." Those 3 words hit him harder than any battle wound. For a moment he couldn't breathe. He wanted to tell her to stay too, that he couldn't imagine another sunrise without her curious hum filling the ship. But he knew what would happen if she did. The Draconus Empire would never stop. They would burn planets, destroy fleets, kill millions just to find her. He stood up slowly, walking toward the viewport, staring out at the dying red light of the star. "Lyra," he said softly, "if you stay, they'll never stop hunting us. They'll destroy everything in their path." Her eyes glistened faintly. "Then we fight." He turned and smiled sadly. "You don't understand. They have fleets, armies, whole worlds under their command. I can't protect you from that." She stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. "You protected me when I was dying. You fed me, healed me, taught me. You gave me life when my world was gone." He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "And I'd do it again. But this isn't about me anymore. You're not that little hatchling I found under the rubble. You're something greater now. You belong to the stars. Not this ship." Lyra's eyes flickered with hurt. Her tail swept the floor. "You're sending me away." Ethan turned his back to her. "I'm saving you," he said quietly. Silence filled the cabin. The hum of the ship felt louder than ever. For a long time neither spoke. Finally, Lyra lifted her wings and looked toward the sky through the viewport. "If I go," she said, "they will know what you did. They will hunt you too." He smiled faintly. "They can try." Lyra looked at him for a long time, memorizing every scar on his face, every line of exhaustion and warmth. "You are not like them," she whispered. "You are kind." Ethan laughed softly. "That's not something people usually say about me." But Lyra shook her head. "Kindness is not weakness. It is fire that does not burn, but saves." He wanted to answer, to tell her that she had already given him more than she would ever know. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he walked to the cargo hold and opened the side hatch. The stars outside shimmered red and gold, the endless expanse calling her home. "It's time," he said. Lyra stepped closer to the opening, the wind from the ship's ventilation rushing past her wings. She turned her head one last time, her eyes bright with emotion. "Will I see you again?" Ethan smiled sadly. "If there's any justice left in this galaxy." "Yeah?" She lowered her head, pressing her snout gently against his chest. Her warmth surrounded him, and for a brief moment, everything, the war, the fear, the silence, faded away. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking, "for giving me life." He placed a hand on her scales. "Go make it worth something." Lyra spread her wings, their glow illuminating the dark hangar. The light was blinding for a moment. Then she leapt into the void, her form gliding through the red haze, wings slicing across the starlight like a comet breaking free. Ethan stood there, watching until she vanished. The silence that followed was deeper than before. Heavier, hours later, he sat alone in the pilot's chair, staring at the empty space where she had disappeared. He felt hollow, like part of him had been torn away. He picked up a small shard of metal from the table, a scale she had shed before leaving. It shimmered faintly, warm to the touch. He closed his hand around it and whispered, "Survive, Lyra." Outside, the dying star flickered one last time before dimming, and the mining station fell into darkness far beyond in the endless night. A flash of blue fire streaked through space. Lyra's first full flight. She soared toward the stars, tears of light trailing behind her. Her heart ached, but her path was clear. For 12 long years, she would remember his words, carry his kindness, and shape an empire in his name. And somewhere deep in that same cold galaxy, a lonely human watched the stars and waited, unaware that his name would soon be written in fire across the heavens. Time flowed like drifting stardust across the cold vacuum of space. 12 long years had passed since Lyra's wings had vanished into the glow of the dying red star, and Ethan Cole had lived every one of those years with her memory etched into his heart. The galaxy moved on, empires rose and fell, battles were fought over borders no one remembered, and heroes became ghosts. But Ethan was not part of that world anymore. He lived quietly on the outer rim, far from the crowded trade routes and military patrols. He worked as a scavenger and mechanic, fixing ships for travelers who never asked questions. His life had shrunk to a handful of tools, a small home made from an old cargo pod, and the soft hum of his aging ship. The nomad every night after work, Ethan would sit outside under the twin moons of the desert planet he now called home, staring up at the stars. He always looked for one particular cluster, the Lyra constellation, and each time he saw it, a faint smile crossed his lips. "You kept your promise, didn't you, kid?" he would whisper. The galaxy had forgotten his name, but he had not forgotten hers. He still kept the silver-blue scale she left behind, framed in glass beside his bed sometimes. When storms rattled the colony, he swore it shimmered faintly, glowing like it had a heartbeat of its own. For 12 years, silence was his only companion, until the night the stars began to move. It started as a low tremor under the sand. The wind shifted, and Ethan's comlink crackled for the first time in months. He frowned, tapping it. "This is Cole," he said. But the static only deepened. Then a soft, rhythmic pulse filled the air, a coded signal, ancient, layered with an energy he had never heard before. He ran to the old radar tower near the canyon ridge. The screens flickered, light stabbing through the dust. At first he thought it was a malfunction, but then he saw it. Hundreds of signatures entering the system. Not human, not any known fleet. The readings were massive, precise, glowing with blue energy cores that looked almost alive. "Impossible," he whispered, adjusting the scanner. The system identified one code among them, a language no human database could fully translate. But one word appeared clearly on the monitor: Lyra. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. No, it can't be. The sky above the desert began to shimmer. A streak of light tore across the horizon like a falling star, then another and another until the whole night burned with blue fire. The people of the colony came out of their shelters, staring upward in awe and fear. The fleet descended like ghosts from the heavens, sleek ships shaped like wings, scales of silver and cobalt moving in perfect silence. Their engines glowed with symbols that shimmered like constellations. Ethan stood at the edge of the canyon, wind whipping his jacket, his eyes wide. "Lyra," he whispered. One of the ships broke formation. Descending slowly toward the colony, it was massive, larger than any human dreadnought, etched with glowing patterns that looked almost alive, and across its hull, written in blue light that stretched from one end to the other, were the words that made Ethan's heart stop beating for a moment. "E. Colefleet, guardian of the Draconis air." He stumbled back, staring in disbelief. "Guardian?" he muttered. The ship hovered above the ground, casting a gentle hum that rippled through the sand. No weapons aimed, no threat detected. Just presence, powerful, calm, almost divine. A voice came through his comlink, soft, melodic, unmistakable, human, it said. "You once gave life where there was none. Do you still watch the stars as I do?" Ethan felt his knees weaken. It was her voice, deeper now, older but filled with the same warmth he remembered. He grabbed the transmitter, his voice shaking. "Lyra, is that really you?" There was a long pause, then a faint laugh, the same musical tone he used to hear when she learned new words. "You still remember," she said, 12 years, and still. "You wait." He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I told you I'd see you again," he said softly. The massive ship lowered its ramp, and from the glowing light, figures began to emerge, tall armored beings with dragon-like crests and flowing cloaks. Their armor bore his insignia, A human hand and a dragon's claw joined together. He stared at it, shaking his head in disbelief. You named your fleet after me? He whispered. The voice answered gently. Not I, Ethan Cole, the Empire did. They remember the man who saved their empress when she was but a dying hatchling. Ethan could hardly speak. The thought that his name had crossed galaxies, turned into legend, was too much. Empress? He murmured. Lyra, you're... Yes, she said softly. I am the ruler of Draconis now, and I have come for the one who showed me mercy when no one else would. He stepped back, the wind catching his jacket. Why me? You are not just anything, her voice interrupted gently. You are the reason I live. You are the flame that taught me what strength truly means. Ethan closed his eyes, a tear cutting down his cheek. 12 years, he said. I thought you were gone. Never gone, Lyra said. Only waiting for the day I could return, not as a child, but as your equal. The ramp extended fully, touching the sand before him. The glow from within the ship spilled across his face. Warm and soft, he could see a silhouette approaching. Tall, elegant, wings folded behind, eyes burning with golden fire. As she stepped into the moonlight, he finally saw her. Lyra, not the small, trembling creature he once rescued, but a being of radiant power, silver blue scales glimmering like stars. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to stand still. Ethan whispered her name again, voice breaking. Lyra. She smiled, her voice gentle but strong. You kept your promise, human, she said, and now I keep mine. Around them, the colony fell silent, watching in awe as the Empress of the Draconis knelt before a single human. Bowing her head low, the winds rose, the stars shimmered, and for the first time in 12 long years, Ethan Cole felt peace. He had spent more than a decade thinking he was forgotten. But now, as the stars burned his name across the sky, he realized something deeper. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can echo through time and space, shaping the destiny of worlds, and in that quiet moment, standing before the Empress of Dragons, he understood. The silence had not been emptiness. It had been the calm before the legend, the waiting before the universe finally remembered his name, Ethan Cole, guardian of the flame. The ground trembled beneath Ethan's boots as the great ship descended through the clouds, dust spiraling upward like golden smoke. The townsfolk had scattered into shelters, whispering prayers, but Ethan stood still, his heart hammering in his chest. The last time he had seen Lyra, she had been small enough to fit in his arms. Now her arrival blotted out the sky. The flagship landed gently in the desert sands, engines whispering like waves. For a long moment, nothing moved. The ramp began to lower slowly, light spilling across the ground. Warm, blue and alive, Ethan's breath caught. A tall figure appeared in the glow, armored in silver scales that shimmered like molten starlight. When she stepped into the open, Ethan felt the years between them collapse. It was Lyra, but changed. No longer the fragile hatchling he'd once nursed back to life, nor the awkward adolescent struggling to control her flame. She was radiant now, powerful, her wings folded neatly behind her back, each feathered scale tipped in light. Her golden eyes held the calm of a queen and the memory of a child. She walked forward slowly, her guards remaining behind. When she stopped in front of him, the silence was so deep Ethan could hear his own pulse. Ethan Cole, she said, her voice smooth as wind over water. You have aged, he chuckled softly. Yeah, 12 years will do that. Her lips curved faintly into a smile. And yet your eyes still carry the same light, the one that found me beneath the ruins. Ethan took a breath, fighting the swell of emotion in his chest. You really became an empress, he said quietly. They call you the Draconis heir. Lyra tilted her head, her golden gaze softening. Because of you, he frowned. Because of me? Yes, she said simply. You taught me mercy when my people only knew conquest. You gave me life when my kin had been slaughtered. You showed me what leadership truly means, not through fear, but through compassion. Her words struck deep. Ethan shook his head. I didn't do anything special. I just couldn't leave you to die. Lyra stepped closer. And that is what makes you different, she said. You gave without expecting anything in return. That is what no empire, no crown, no dragon could ever understand. The desert wind howled softly around them, carrying the echoes of her words into the night. Ethan looked up at the sky. where her fleet hung like constellations reborn. All this, he said quietly. All this came from that one day. Lyra followed his gaze. From a choice, she replied. A human's choice to save a dying hatchling. That act echoed across time. It became legend. It changed my people. He laughed softly, shaking his head. Guess I'm part of your bedtime stories now. She smiled wider, her fangs glinting faintly in the starlight. Not stories, Ethan. History. For a while they stood in silence, watching the ships drift in formation above. Their hums resonated like a heartbeat through the sands. Then Lyra turned to him, her voice lowering. I came not only to thank you, but to ask. Ask what? She hesitated, searching his face. To stand beside me, Ethan blinked. You mean? Yes, she said softly. As my guardian once more, not in secrecy, not in hiding, but in honor. The Draconis people wish to recognize you, to make you part of their court, a symbol of the peace between human and dragon kind. Ethan laughed quietly, a dry, disbelieving sound. Me? A court member? Lyra, I barely kept my ship running these past years. Lyra's expression softened. And yet your name lives on every vessel I command. Your kindness guides my empire. Every child born under my reign learns your story. They know the words Ethan Cole, the man who chose light in a galaxy of war. He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. I never wanted any of that. I know, she said. That is why you deserve it. Her hand, scaled but gentle, reached out and touched his shoulder. Come with me, she whispered. See what you created. Ethan hesitated, glancing back toward the small colony, the life he had built out of loneliness. I don't belong in your world, Lyra, he said softly. I'm just a man, she smiled, eyes shining with something that looked almost like tears. You are more than that. You are proof that different worlds can understand each other. You are the bridge between stars. Before he could answer, a sudden roar of engines echoed above. One of the fleet ships descended lower, its hull bearing his symbol, the joined hand and claw. And below it, soldiers knelt and rose, their heads bowed toward him. Lyra turned toward them and raised her voice. Before all, I name this man Ethan Cole, the first guardian of flame, protector of the Draconis air, savior of the new empire. The words rolled like thunder across the desert. Ethan felt hundreds of eyes upon him, hundreds of hearts united by that single memory. He tried to speak, but his throat closed. Finally, he managed. Lyra, I don't deserve this, she looked at him, her gaze steady. You do, and no matter what you believe, every life you touched through me knows it too. The wind carried the scent of heat and ozone, the air trembling with quiet reverence. Lyra stepped back and unfurled her wings. The glow from them bathed him in light. Gentle and warm. Come, she said softly. Let me show you what your kindness built. Ethan stared at her for a long time. At the friend he had once saved. At the empress she had become. He nodded slowly, a tired but peaceful smile spreading across his face. All right, Lyra, he said. Lead the way. As they walked toward the great ship, her shadow stretched long beside his. Two figures, human and dragon, moving together across the glowing sands. And for the first time in 12 long years, Ethan felt something he had thought lost forever. Purpose. Above them, the fleet began to rise in formation, engines whispering songs of flame and peace. The galaxy would remember this night, the moment when a man and a dragon walked side by side once more. Not as savior and saved, but as equals. The return of the air had begun, and the legend of the Guardian of Flame was only just awakening. The dawn over the desert came in colors no human eye had ever seen. Streaks of violet and gold shimmered across the horizon as the Draconis fleet hovered above the sands, each ship glowing softly like a constellation reborn. Ethan stood beside Lyra at the foot of her flagship, the wind from its thrusters tugging gently at his coat. He had not slept, he could not. His mind was still catching up with the truth, that the little dragon he once wrapped in his jacket was now the empress who commanded the stars. Lyra turned to him, her eyes reflecting the sunrise. They are waiting for you, she said quietly. Her voice was still gentle, but it carried the authority of someone who ruled billions. Waiting for me? Ethan asked, his brow furrowing. For what? She smiled softly. To see the human whose heart changed the fate of the Draconis. To meet the guardian who turned mercy into legend. Ethan laughed under his breath, shaking his head. I don't feel like a legend, Lyra. I'm just a tired old scavenger who got lucky. Lyra stepped closer, placing her clawed hand over his chest. "No, Ethan," she said. "You are a light that never went out, even in darkness." Before he could answer, the sky filled with sound. Deep, resonant drums that echoed through the air. The fleet began to shift, aligning itself into perfect formation. Thousands of dragon-born soldiers descended in lines, their armor gleaming like living flame. Each one carried banners marked with a single symbol. A human hand joined with a dragon's claw. Glowing in gold and blue, Ethan stared in awe, his throat tight. "That's my insignia," he whispered. Lyra nodded proudly. "It is our bond made eternal. Every Draconist child learns its meaning, that strength and kindness are not opposites, but one and the same." She turned to face the assembly, her wings spreading wide. The soldiers bowed low, their voices rising together in a deep, thunderous chant that seemed to shake the sky. "Guardian of flame, keeper of the light." Ethan stood frozen, emotion flooding through him. He had never sought honor or glory, only survival. Yet here he was, a man whose simple act of compassion had become a story sung by an empire. Lyra's voice carried through the air. 12 years ago, when fire turned against fire, when the Draconists nearly destroyed themselves, a single human reached out a hand to save one of our kind. That hand became the bridge that ended centuries of hate. It gave us hope when we had none. "It gave me life," she turned, her gaze soft as it found his. "That human stands before you today, not as a soldier, not as a conqueror, but as the one who reminded us that mercy can be stronger than war. From this day forward, let every flame that burns in Draconis space carry his name, Ethan Cole." "The first guardian of flame!" The crowd erupted, their roars rising like a storm of sound. Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. He wanted to speak, to tell them he didn't deserve any of this, but when he met Lyra's gaze, he saw only truth. This was not about him alone. It was about what he had given to her, what she had become, and what their story had become to everyone else. When the ceremony ended, Lyra led him aboard her flagship. The interior was vast and glowing with veins of living metal. Light followed their steps as if the ship itself recognized them. In the great hall, portraits of past rulers lined the walls, fierce and proud. But at the end of the hall stood something new, a mural carved in shimmering stone. It showed a man kneeling beside a wounded hatchling. The two surrounded by stars, Ethan stopped and stared, his voice barely a whisper. "That's us." Lyra's wings folded softly behind her. "Yes," she said. "Our beginning, the story that will never fade." He turned to her, still overwhelmed. "You built all this from a single act of kindness?" Lyra smiled faintly. "No," she said, "we built it. You gave me a reason to believe that life was worth more than vengeance. I gave that belief to my people. Together, we built peace." They walked along the mural in silence. The air hummed gently, filled with warmth and light. For the first time in years, Ethan felt no emptiness in his chest, just quiet pride. He stopped beside the viewing deck. Gazing out at the stars, the fleet shimmered in formation, thousands of vessels bearing his insignia. "Moving as one, you know," he said softly. "I used to think the stars didn't care about us, that no matter what we did, the universe would keep turning." Cold and empty, Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes shining. "And now?" He smiled. "Now I think maybe the stars remember." Lyra's voice softened. "They do, because your name burns among them now." Outside, the fleet engines ignited, sending soft ripples of light across the void. The stars seemed to pulse in rhythm as if answering her words. Ethan turned to her, his voice low. "So what happens now, Empress?" She met his gaze, the corners of her lips curving upward. "Now," she said, "we begin, humans and Draconis together. You will help me build this future." "Guardian?" He laughed, shaking his head. "You're giving me too much credit again." Lyra leaned closer, her eyes warm. "No, Ethan. I'm only giving you what you've earned." He nodded slowly, his heart steady. "Then let's make it count." As they stood together side by side, the stars outside seemed to shift. Millions of tiny lights forming shapes, words and patterns, and in that silent, endless sky, one name glowed brighter than all the rest, E. Cole. Ships across the empire broadcast the same message, the story of a man and a dragon, of kindness that shaped galaxies and far below, on worlds that had once known only war. Children looked up at the night sky and whispered the name like a prayer. Ethan Cole, the guardian of flame, the man who turned compassion into history. He looked out one last time at the sea of stars and whispered softly, "You kept your promise, Lyra. She smiled beside him, her voice a whisper carried by the wind of the cosmos. And you kept yours. Together, they watched their reflection in the window. A human and a dragon, light and shadow, hope and history intertwined. Beyond them, the stars burned brighter, carrying their story forever forward. A legend not of power, but of kindness written in fire across the stars.